Hi, Craig.
Hi, Greg.
Hi, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the paddock. I'm LeAnne, and today I'm going to chat with a few of the other ladies about Drive Survive and maybe give some insight into the reality TV world. As a little note, yes, I work in television sometimes, but I do not work on this show, so anything I talk about today is more so based on previous jobs on other shows and how I can only assume the team has gone about producing and editing this wonderful series that we all enjoy. I just loved the idea of this episode, getting to chat with the paddock about the ins and outs of the TV world. Even just noticing little editing choices is fun for me. And again, I do not have any association with DTS. This is all just ideas of how you could produce and edit a show like theirs. But if the production team wanted to hire me, I would drop probably everything for them. Sorry, ladies. All right, now on to the wonderful ladies that have joined me in the paddock today. We have Chelsea, Meg, and Hannah. I just wanted to do a little TV inspired intro with the girls, and I'm going to jump right into it and ask y'all some get to know you questions. First question: did Drive Survive get you into F1 or make your appreciation stronger?
I think for me, while I definitely was watching F1 prior to DTS coming out, I think it made me kind of fall in love with it a little bit more because it was kind of portrayed into a different light. And I started actually following the drivers a little bit more than just like the races in general. So probably a lot more appreciation, to be honest, because that's kind of where my love for some of my favorite drivers to date came from.
So DTS did get me into F1 in the sense that I was really never into sports because it was just something to watch. But seeing the behind the scenes of what was happening and really understanding how the teams worked and how the drivers came into play and the team principals, the engineering, all of it really got me into the sport. And suddenly I was watching the races every single weekend and the practice and the qualies and following everyone on social media. So I would say it gave me a huge appreciation for it. Even if I understand obviously that it's dramatized, it still shows you more than you would ever get from just watching a race.
So I would say prior to watching DTS, I was actually more into IndyCar and that sort of racing just because of, like I mentioned previously on our IndyCar episode, that my dad used to take me to races when I was little. So that's where my fascination for racing came from. But one night, it was during COVID, my mom saw DTS on Netflix and was like, Megan, we should watch this. Like, I've heard of this and it's about racing. We like racing. Let's watch it. So we started watching it and we both fell in love, and definitely, like Hannah and Chelsea have said, our appreciation has grown immensely from this show and definitely follow it more and more. And now we're here making a podcast about it. So
Basically, roundabout, thank God for DTS, or the podcast probably wouldn't exist because we wouldn't have gotten into it as strongly. Next question: what other reality shows do you watch if you watch any?
I don't necessarily seek out reality TV. I do when I want something. This is gonna sound really bad, but when I want something that's kind of stupid or that will numb my brain, like if I need something that's just if I'm having a bad day and I just need something with nothing. I don't know if that makes sense. But so I've watched Big Brother in the past. My mom and I are huge fans of that show. Of course, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise. I have seen of Love Island, and I have seen what's that show on Netflix? Is it that Love is Blind show where they're yeah, where they don't see each other? And Love on the Spectrum. I like that show. It's another one on Netflix. It's a very good show. But yeah, biggest reality show is probably Big Brother.
So I kind of feel like I'm going to be judged by some of these choices, but I do like Below Deck Mediterranean. I also like Vanderpump Rules, but I go in and out of watching them. I like Love is Blind, Love Island, and I don't know if this counts, but Selling Sunset. That's on Netflix. Absolutely obsessed with that show. Hands down, watch it over and over and over again. And like you mentioned, Meg, it's kind of numbing, and it's also weird because you get to see people being relatively stupid and you're not involved in the drama. So you get to watch other people have drama, which is nice.
I will never judge you for what you watch because one of my favorite is Pawn Stars. So can't really judge you if that's what I'm watching. And I also really love the dating shows. Like I don't really get into them too much. I used to really watch The Bachelor, big fan, and I love the home improvement I don't know if like you would count home improvement as reality shows, but I love those things. And I did see Love is Blind though. That one was really good. I really like the dumb shows. I watched a lot of reality TV with my dad though. So like there's this car reality show where they're just fixing cars in every episode. That shit is so fun. But yeah, I really like reality TV watching with my dad mostly, and he's been watching Tex-Mex Motors on Netflix. It's fun. I love that thing. I like am I going to fix a car? No, but I love watching people restore them.
Also, I just thought of this, but the shows on Netflix that kind of came from Drive to Survive, like they have one about golf and one about tennis, those are also really good. And it kind of got me to start watching tennis, which I never in a million years thought I would watch tennis, but this show got me into it, so it was very good.
All right, to wrap up the little question portion, what driver would you like to see have their own reality show? Or what current reality show could you see drivers on? I love dream casting shows. It's my favorite thing to do.
I would really love to see Max have a show. But like I know they did the little docu-series, but like no. I want Red Bull itself. Like you know The Office? I want The Office with Red Bull and Max and Daniel and Checo. That's what I want. But it's like specifically Red Bull. I know the other teams, they're cool. No. I need Daniel, Max, and Checo on The Office with Checo looking at the camera just like, what are these idiots talking about every 5 seconds? But if it was like Dreamcasting, I don't know. I feel like some of the drivers would probably do good on Dancing with the Stars. Just a vibe. I would love to see that. I think there was already a driver that might have done it too.
Honestly, Chelsea, I would love to see The Office with them, and I can even imagine it in my head. Because I don't know if you remember the scene where Max and Danny were riding those little, like, small little bicycles or whatnot through the Red Bull place, and Checo's just like, what the hell? But I feel like if any two drivers had a reality show, it would definitely be Danny because he's just hilarious and I feel like he makes it. But here's another one. Pierre. The sassy, weird Pierre with Kika. I feel like that would be like a good. I don't know where I'd want them. They probably have their own. They'd probably be like in the life of Pierre Gasly. Um, and like get to see what he is and go into like the Alpine garage and all that. But maybe.
After you saying that, Hannah, I could honestly see like the Strolls having a reality TV show since like Lawrence and Lance and Chloe and then Scotty, and we could also see Danny. I honestly think that would probably be a very good show. Just with all the drama, it would be amazing.
I'm surprised Lawrence hasn't already pitched it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the businessman that he is, you'd think he'd be on top of that. But, I don't know. Can any of the drivers sing? I mean, I know we hear, like, their AI covers on TikTok and stuff, but could we see any of them on, like, X Factor or
I bet Lando secretly can sing.
I wouldn't put it past him. The AI cover is pretty damn good, so... And he can DJ.
Honestly, Chloe and Scotty would be amazing as a reality show because their TikToks are spread that love to Lance and Lawrence and teach them some stuff. Please and thank you.
Can we pitch this to the Strolls and then, like, get our hands in, like, a little reality TV show? I mean, we have a producer. We have LeAnne. So, I'm just saying.
Give me 2 days. I'll have a full pitch in 2 days. Just I'll write one on Tuesday. Now that we've met everybody and we've had some fun little chit chats about reality TV, I'm gonna jump into talking about how it kind of typically goes filming shows, and I'm gonna base this off of the sports show that I worked on last year. It was a football show. Fingers crossed it comes out one day because it was supposed to come out, hasn't come out. Typical television life. but producers generally choose a team per week to focus on. So they will have multiple producing duos. I want to say we had about 5 on that show, and they basically get sent out to film different teams at different times. So the producing team will plan out what they hope to film leading up to a race weekend or game weekend. Once the weekend happens, you kind of stick as close to that team that you're locked in with and your plan and schedule, but basically you're just hoping for the best. Half of a week of prep is just planning what you hope could happen. Or if there's anything like, say, Gunter driving around with Matteo, that had to be pre-planned, figured out, picked out the right car for it, set up the car, get approval to film at whatever restaurant they're at. Like during the COVID times, we would basically go in 2 hours prior with the COVID team and they would have to just fully spray everything down. So that's added stuff into there. COVID was definitely a hard time for filming because of the extra hours into prep during the day. Anyways, when I was on the previous show I'd mentioned, each producing duo got assigned a team. Then you would get a week to prep, meeting your coaches and players, getting to know each team and figuring out who was most interested in being featured and who just really would rather not. And hopefully someone would be just enthusiastic to just want to do whatever. Think of like Danny for Drive to Survive. He's down to just film whatever. Like that is the golden cast member that you want that's just like, yeah, sure, we'll film. Whatever, what do you want to do? But then you got the guys that are like Lewis and Max, where first season, Lewis wasn't really involved. He waited to figure it out. Second season, obviously, he being the 7-time or almost 7-time, I forget what era that was when DTS started, but he kind of had more to like weigh before joining a quote unquote reality show because it's more docu-series. Whereas Max, he dropped out when he kind of, my assumption is, went through some contract negotiations to the point of Red Bull and him getting say in what goes in and what can't go in. But I'll discuss more on that a little bit later. Going back into planning the episodes, you would plan out what kind of stuff the players or coaches would be interested in doing. So like if someone wanted to film a workout or if someone wanted you to drive around with them during the day to like whatever their side job was, you would have to basically plan the route, see how many crew and producing and all that stuff, who you need with you and whatnot, and then figure out what's the best day to do that, see if it can rearrange the schedule. It's just way more goes into it than anybody really expects. Even me jumping into new shows, I'm like, oh, I didn't even think that I would have to plan 2 days in advance to do just a quick scene at a field. Like you really have to just lock in that stuff because especially COVID time, you couldn't have more than a certain number of people around. So it was all just very interesting. But then you also have to consider sometimes we have to purchase props for scenes, like even just getting a t-shirt for someone because you have to make sure there's no brand label. If it is a branded label, you have to see if you can get approval of said brand unless it's their own design. That's why a lot of the times you'll see reality stars wearing their own brand on TV and it's like, oh, they're just like showing off. No, it's an approved outfit that they design, which is why like Danny having Enchante, he could get the whole grid to wear it and they would never have to worry about anything with that, any of that stuff, because he would just have to approve that they can wear it on the show. Like on Jersey Shore, Vinny always started to wear his own brand. So then he didn't have to worry about having just solid clothes or putting a tape over top of a label or anything like that, so it just looks stupid. Once prep week ended, you immediately go right into your filming week. After your shoot week, you would get a week off, which during you would honestly find out who your next team would be. And even though it's an off week, you would already start the same thing. You'd start reaching out to people and get ready for your next round of shoots, but also help out the other producing teams that were the main team that week. And everyone came together on game days for an all hands on deck producing and filming day. I would also like to add that we would generally get 1 day off a week, which is very normal for production, but also never surprising when you ended up working your entire day off. In the show I produced, we would do OTFs, which are on-the-fly interviews. So we would literally grab players or coaches in the middle of a game or practice and interview them in the moment to get true reactions. Yes, that means while you are paying attention to a live action game, making sure you don't get hit by anything or anyone, listening to players and coaches mic'd up Having your walkie going off with producers talking back and forth, you are also supposed to be thinking of any questions you could be asking any person on the field or sideline at any moment. And I'm also going to add, sometimes as a producer, I jumped in to make sure a camera guy didn't get run over or an audio guy didn't get run over. It was generally a lot going on at once. So to also have to come up with questions that you could ask anybody that just all of a sudden is in your face while they have massive adrenaline going and also didn't like that you were there was a lot. I personally, though, would absolutely love to see OTFs on Drive Survive just for the pure adrenaline fueled responses from certain drivers, principals, and engineers. Like, imagine having to go get an OTF from Max right after he lost a race. That would be my favorite thing in the world. Would I want to do it? No, but I would want to watch somebody do it. It'd be amazing. Would it air? Probably not. Outside of OTFs, we also scheduled normal sit-down interviews that sometimes weren't filmed for days or weeks later, which then you have to get the cast back in the headspace and remind them to talk like it's present tense, which is harder than you would even expect. And the biggest thing you wouldn't expect to be hard for cast members is to say their answers in their question. So like, say I asked Meg, what did you do last weekend? She would have to say, last weekend I blah da 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 da, because it's never fun to have the producer's voice in the edit. So generally you tend to, unless it's a funny back and forth between producer and cast, they try to do anything not to have to break the fourth wall.
So, like, in Drive to Survive, it's pretty popular that you can kind of hear the producers and people asking the questions, isn't it? So is that maybe just like a choice they did on purpose? Or you think it was just easier for their editing crew?
Sometimes it's a choice, but I would say it was probably easier for them because I would say having so many drivers that English is not their first language, it's probably harder to like explain repeat the question in your answer. So I almost would assume that it's just easier that way, but then it does, I think, gives a more personal tone when you hear a producer, and I always like hearing a producer, but that could just be because I'm like, oh, coworkers. Like on my shows, if I hear one of the producers, I like listening to see, and I'll be like, oh, that's so-and-so. And then we always shoot a text like, congrats, you're in the episode.
I wonder if some of the producers, knowing that, some of the drivers' English is not their first language, if when they're picking producers, they pick producers that speak multiple languages to help be more fluent and talk to the drivers, like where they like record them speaking English to them, but then they can like translate it so they better understand like their native language. I wonder if that's the thing or if I'm just making it up in my head.
They could also have a translator there, like maybe their engineer or something could be in there and working as a translator if needed. But usually certain ones that I've worked on, the producer interviewing the cast member is somewhat like, they usually are like, all right, this person's closest with this cast member, so we can probably get them to feel more comfortable to openly answer other questions. Whereas like if they're not as comfortable with a different producer, they're like, I'm not going to talk to you about that. So it's on like really getting to know your cast so that they're comfortable with you and whatnot. Like on a dating show that I did, one of my friends, she was the only one allowed to interview one of the cast members because that's the only person that she would talk to.
I wonder how they like get along and get to know each other, because it's got to be hard for both sides, especially, for instance, just referencing DTS. I mean, Max is not very active on the show, not very one to be interviewed or whatnot. And sometimes, the drivers portray DTS in a bad light, and then vice versa, DTS portrays the drivers in a bad light. So I wonder how the producers and the drivers work together to like make it more comfortable for both parties. Do they go to dinner? Do they hang out? Like, how do they do that?
On the sports show that I did, because it kind of would realm in the same way, how you're not always with the certain people, we would either like text back and forth or do quick phone calls with certain cast members to kind of like get the feel, introduce ourselves to them. And we did go to dinner with a couple of them as like a quick little meeting to like chat about stuff before episodes happen. But generally, once you're like there a lot with them, you'd be surprised like how close you do get with certain people, because then they'll start seeing you every day or every few days, and like you have a day off and like, wait, where were you yesterday? You're like, oh, sorry, I had a day off. And they're like, oh, okay, we just didn't know where you went. Like it starts to get like that where you'll like notice that they'll be like, wait, why isn't that one there? Or I went home one of the days and I came back a couple days later and they were like, where have you been? I was like, I just started 2 weeks ago. How did you already notice that I wasn't here? So it's just people get like sets really get very close quickly because you're like usually just around each other, at least on the ones that I've been on. There tend to be very, you're only with them because I've done like a lot of house shows and stuff like that. So once you're there, you're there. And that's the only form of contact you have to the outside world sometimes.
So like a familiar face. Once you see a familiar face
Yeah.
around the office, like, you know, all the time when they're not there, you're like, what the heck? Like, that's my buddy. Like, where are they?
Yeah. I've had it where cast members aren't that fond of me and my producing team because at the end of the day, they know that we're trying to create a television show. So if you're sitting there reading a book, we're not interested. Television's not interesting if you're reading a book. So generally, books are not allowed on television shows. You'll notice that. No one's ever really reading. They're not allowed in the house. You're usually not even allowed, tend to not really have journals because they want you interacting with everybody. If you're just sitting there lollygagging to yourself, not interesting, you're not going to be in the episode, so why are you there? That's what it is at the end of the day. But yeah, I've definitely had it where one day a cast member is so like happy to see you, and then the next day they're like, I can't trust you. I don't know how this is going to be, and all that kind of stuff. Because then they don't know what the edit's going to be. Once they start realizing, oh, how am I being portrayed? Especially on like relatively live filming shows. They're like, do you know how people are reacting to me? No, I'm not watching it. I'm staying here in the moment, as you should, which is basically how it goes. I know a lot of people have wondered, I've seen it online, in our group chat, why do some races not get featured? And honestly, production needs breaks. So sometimes it could be that they were focusing so much on another race and prep for that one that they just didn't expect to even need to be there. Especially motorsports, you really cannot accurately predict what will happen. There is also a possibility that a team could have vetoed the feature if something occurred that they didn't want to air. But if I was producing Drive to Survive, I would have been majorly bummed out if we didn't have our cameras at Brazil 2022, or at least weren't able to feature it in the final edit for reasons out of their control. On the football show I worked on, they were missing the game between these two huge rivals that we were filming the next week. But since the game fell in a week that wasn't either of the team's filming week, my producing partner and I decided we were just going to drive to the game anyway, just to get to know one of the teams more, because the week prior, we were filming with the other rival. Well, the game ended up being insane, and we had to film the entire night on the best quality on our phones. Yes, I'm talking we had game footage, OTF interviews, random B-roll of the rain and fog coming in. Thank God the new phones film on 4K, because we would have lost out on honestly the best game of the season. It was raining, the fog was rolling in from the water, we were in Brooklyn, it was just insane. And it would honestly be my roundabout assumption for why Netflix didn't include something like Brazil in season 4, just that it was an off week. The other possibility is the drama of the race may have been something they were told they couldn't include from one of the teams. Not that I would name any names, but I would assume, possibly in contracts, they are able to say what cannot be put into a final edit, especially with a team that's maybe you could say number one. I don't know. But to be honest, I'm leaning towards the latter because there's no way they didn't have a crew in Brazil. And honestly, with the pool to Formula One that Netflix Drive Survive has given, a lot of the other motorsports have started to pop up with stuff like there's 100 Days to Indy, which I'd watched the first episode or two, and it was nice to get into it a little bit, but you could definitely tell it was like guerrilla filmed in a way where they're just like, all right, we're here, let's start going. And I loved it. I really did. I need to get back into watching it. It's not on Hulu anymore. So Hulu, can you put it back for me, please? Thank you. And I know Hannah, maybe Chelsea too, have started to watch the F2 documentary series. So did you guys want to touch on that a little bit?
So yeah, I've been kind of watching the docu-series like LeAnne mentioned. It's called Chasing the Dream. You can find it on the F1 TV app. And kind of like you mentioned with Indy, it's very like raw footage and definitely not like Netflix. So it's kind of portrayed in a whole different another light. And they take you like into the paddock, almost kind of like their engineer or like one of the technicians are like taking the camera around and just showing you. So that's a little different. I am only on episode 2, or just finished episode 2, going into episode 3, and it's really good. I just need to finish watching it. Like, I need more time in the day, guys. I'm sorry. I just don't have enough time in my life, but it is on my list to finish.
And if you want to watch it, you can watch it on Formula One TV if you have the subscription. There's 5 seasons, but they're like really short seasons. It's like 5 episodes each. And each episode is like usually 30 minutes, but I feel like they're getting shorter as the seasons go. But it's nice. And if you go to like the first season, you can see like baby Mick Schumacher. He's in the first season. And there's other drivers that you'll like see that are currently in Formula One that were in the show from like all the way in the back, because I think it started 2019. So it's really interesting. And if you have the subscription, like you can watch all of the seasons.
Yeah, and we mentioned this in the F2 episode, so go watch that if you want. But there is currently 5 seasons out, and so if you're looking for a weekend binge, enjoy because it's really good.
And since we know that there's all these shows for the motorsports, there's always the talk of a curse. And the story goes whichever garage the Netflix crew is in for the weekend has a very bad race. Now, personally, I don't believe this curse because there's never just one crew. Crews tend to be broken down to mini crews so a couple teams can be filmed at once. But I also would never doubt that the production doesn't have at least one camera pop into every single garage every day of a race weekend, because a lot of footage can be edited to use throughout the whole series if it isn't obviously showing a location or time. B-roll is honestly the best filler to exist for shows. And I know Lando had watched scenes from Drive to Survive, and he loved to sarcastically point out, like, oh yeah, we're in Monaco, but that's a shot from Abu Dhabi or whatever it was. But he also did later correct himself because he's like, oh shit, never mind, we are supposed to be in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, like that's just, if they didn't get the reaction that they wanted, they're going to try to bank it somewhere else. And honestly, I don't see a problem with it because it made the show look so freaking good. Imagine if we didn't have half the shots. If they had missed it in Monaco or something, and then they just got it in like Austria. I don't think those lined up, but you get what I mean?
Yeah, I'll be completely honest with you. While I understand the Netflix curse and the thought process that goes into it, I feel like it's so hard to prove that that is an actual thing. It seems more of a conspiracy than anything else. And I'm a factual, like, facts type of person, and I'm like, prove it. Like, where is this documented? How do you know? Like, a crew needs to follow the crew to be able to tell. And if you need someone, I got you.
Also, it's always just people wanting an excuse for their driver. Like, no, maybe they just didn't have a good day. Let's not blame people doing their job.
I will say, I'm not superstitious. I'm like a little stitious. But this is how I want to do the math at the end of the season, because I've never really cared that much to follow it. I want to see if, like, maybe that one weekend where Max didn't get first place, were they there? That one weekend? That's how I'm going to check. I'm going to see the days that Red Bull did bad, because Red Bull never does bad. So the days that Red Bull did bad, were they in the paddocks with them? And if they were, maybe there's a curse. That's how I'm going to do the math for it.
Which everyone wants to talk about Brazil 2022. That was a bad Red Bull day. Where were they?
That is a very good point.
I mean, you could also say the same thing about Nico Rosberg. Or, like, is that a legit curse, or is it just coincidence?
That's a curse. No, he's doing witchcraft.
I mean, I wouldn't put it past certain people to do witchcraft down there, but I don't know. Definitely, yeah, Hannah's stirring the pot. Definitely stirring the pot down in the grid.
I wonder if some of the drivers are like into crystals or tarot cards or the obsession with horoscopes. And like that.
It's tarot cards.
It's tarot.
Tarot cards.
Tarot.
But anyways, I wonder if they're into it. Because if they are, maybe that with the conspiracy theory is like something.
I'm gonna tell you who's into it, and all of you guys can fight me on this, but for sure it's true. Lewis Hamilton. He has crystals. I know he does. That man would totally be into it. He's gotten his cards read. I'm sure he's gotten his palm read. I'm sure he's gone to a santeria. Like, I'm sure he's gone into cleansing. That man has to be into it.
Maybe Charles should take some lessons from him.
Charles did start wearing an evil eye, but I haven't seen it since that one day.
He also went to a priest. So, or a
Interesting.
priest went to him. I don't know.
I think
He
he
saw a
was
priest.
visiting. He was at. I think he went to like just an event somewhere, but it involved a priest. He was at something that he was known to be coming to. I think.
What about Lando? I feel like Lando
No.
loves horoscopes, but
No, Lando sarcastically liked horoscopes. That was all sarcasm.
you're probably right. It was his
He
facial
knew his
expressions were
sign, and
hilarious.
that's it.
I could see him believing in a curse or like there being some reason for something going wrong, but I don't know if would believe that he would believe in like the tarot cards and I don't know. It's like so iffy with him because you can never tell if he's being sarcastic or like not. So no, I definitely don't think Oscar would believe it. If you put the two of them together, Lando would believe it more. But
And I know we'll dive more into all the horoscopes and astrology when our resident astrology nerds, I love you guys, Amy and Rachel, do their episode. I'm excited to just listen in on that. That's going to be fun. And I actually want to jump in and take a little break in this and let the girls ask some questions so that I can finish eating this cookie. Thank you.
So I'm going to jump around on DTS with these seasons. So excuse me, LeAnne, for that. So in season 5, they missed so many important highlights from the races or drivers. The perspective of the Netflix series, I wonder why they would miss those items during filming. Like the Max and Perez not getting along. That's probably a contract thing. Danny's depression with McLaren. They only covered his leaving message, and I feel like that man deserved a little bit more for kind of holding DTS together for a lot of the seasons. Georgie's first podium win. And then why did they have to show Zhou's accident so many times through season 5? Did we not get enough content?
So I'll touch on Danny first because I honestly think he got a lot more at the end than anybody would. Because if you can think about it, Seb didn't get anything. He retired. He didn't get a little special thing. They honored Danny at the end. That's not really a normal thing unless you actually like the character. So I really do think that they did a lot. I think personally they probably were a little iffy to touch on the mental health, or maybe Danny was uncomfortable about it because he doesn't really like to, from what I can see, doesn't really like to show anything but happy-go-lucky Danny. So I think just that very chilled out, upset Danny didn't get the camera time that anybody would expect, but he did get fully honored, I think, in the best way. And like, I think I teared up watching it the first time because I was just like, oh, the boy that brought me into this.
No, you bring up a good point, and I think they didn't show Seb's like message, but they showed like someone saying, "Oh, Seb started an Instagram account or like a TikTok," and then like filming and then them watching the video together.
It was Checo because he was doing his interview and he was like, "Oh, like Sebastian made a Instagram," and he went to go look at it and he's just like open mouth, like, "What is this?"
Yeah, Netflix was definitely happy to get that full live reaction to that. That was their way of being like, oh yeah, and then then it cuts to black and white, Seb sitting down. I'm here to announce the end of my career. Yeah, it was so good how they did that. Oh, I loved it. What was another one of them?
Georgie's podium win and Joe's accident.
I think unfortunately for George, because his podium win happened at a very negative Red Bull race. My assumption, if they were there, because Brazil is right before Abu Dhabi, and because of how you have to get ready for stuff, they could have been like, well, whatever, it's Brazil. We'll just jump over to Abu Dhabi and start setting up. That kind of thing. It could have easily been that. But if they were there, I think George was just collateral damage to a Max Checo moment that wasn't allowed to be aired if they got the footage of it. And that kind of answered both, right? Or do you want me to go more in depth?
No. That's perfect. And then just like lastly, Joe's accident. Do you know why they would have filmed that so many times?
It was excessive for Joe's accident, but my assumption for that would be Joe's accident was very much so replayed constantly. I think one, it was the biggest crash of the season, but in a way, when I was watching that season, I feel like they were editing it like it was a weekly drop. Like part of me wonders if it was originally going to be a weekly dropped episode, like if that season they were going to be like, all right, we're going to drop an episode every Thursday or Friday or something. Because the way it was done was like how if it's been a week, oh yeah, remember this happened last week, we're going to get a new team's perspective of it. Because that's really what it was, is each team got to give their own perspective of that crash. So when I first watched that season, I was like, I wonder if it wasn't supposed to be all dropped at once. That's my guess.
No, it makes sense because, I mean, completely off topic, but like Summer I Turned Pretty, they drop an episode every Friday and they kind of briefly like recap like shortly from the previous season.
It's like people are so not used to normal television anymore. Where it's like, go back to the days of like Friends and even Supernatural when it first started, since it was on for 15 years, my favorite show in the world. But every week you would just need a quick little recap of last week. But yeah, it's just everyone's so used to just seasons getting dropped all at once that when it's not, they're like, what happened? I forget. It's like, okay, but it just felt like they edited it like it was supposed to be weekly, not all at once. I kind of wish it was weekly. Then you don't binge it. I love binging, but I also like to extend watching things.
I can see both perspectives there. But I do have another question for you. So, well, I actually have a lot, so sorry. Do you think, because COVID was around for so long and it was very prevalent, do you think the DTS staff and or like the drivers and teams behind the scenes still test for COVID? I mean, they travel so much, so it would make sense. But they're also around so many people too. So how do you really stop it?
Well, the show I was on last year, we were testing every other day still. Cast would get tested every day, every other day, but that's because the cast is very secluded. But yeah, we were still masked up behind cameras at all times, still getting tested. I had to test before I flew. I had to test the second I landed and got to a hotel. But yeah, television world is very much so. Last I was on something, we were very much so still masked up, testing every other day, cast tests every day. When we filmed, obviously it's a little bit harder for Formula One, but when we filmed games, people that wanted to come and view the game had to get tested as they walked in, or anybody that was going to be on the sideline had to get tested as they walked in, and then any fan got at least temp checked. But obviously, Formula One brings in like 400K fans sometimes, so can't really ask a COVID team to do that.
Right.
But crew-wise, we tend to very much so still be COVID exists.
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be rough. I just remember getting tested so much during COVID, and I did not like it. So, bless y'all's soul. Mm-mm.
I've probably taken at least 50 tests now.
So, my mom actually had a question for LeAnne because she knew we were filming this episode and she knows what LeAnne does. But her question was kind of like, how do they manage to keep DTS like quote unquote new? Although we've all seen how the season progresses and what happens. Like, like how the playbook they're gonna follow. How do you change it up so it's not boring or so viewership doesn't drop?
I would say it's literally being inside the rooms. Like, we actually, especially this last season, got to be in meeting rooms. We got to be in drivers' meetings at some point. We got to be in principal meetings. I mean, the iconic moment of this past season was in the principal's meeting room, which no one had ever really, as far as I know, seen in one of those meetings before. So I think it's the fact that every single season, you never know, like, are we actually going to be able to see so and so break down or any of that stuff? Like, getting that inside scoop that interview, like, Will Buxton isn't going to get, but he's going to mansplain it to you later. I say that with all the love, Will Buxton, because I do love you. You're just, your interviews, you know what you're doing in your interview chair, and you know it, and I love it.
So this question is from Amy, and she's not in the episode, but she wanted to know, do you think there was like a specific driver who they initially planned to focus the show on? Because in season 1, it looked like Danny Rick was potentially going to be the main focus.
Great question, Amy. Wish you were here. I would say that was more so because Danny was the one most down to play that season. And then once season 2 happened and as it progressed, we got like bigger ratings and everything like that, then other drivers were like, oh wait, I'm down to be in it. Hold on, I could be a part of this too. But definitely Danny was the one most down to play. And as a producer, you want the person that's not going to give you pushback, that's down to just, yeah, you can come spend the day at the farm with me, or yeah, go ahead, follow me around. Let's do an interview. Cool. And it's just fun to be around. So yeah, that's I would say they always plan to be around everybody. It just so happened that the star Australian really pulled everybody in. I mean, he's who got me into it. If it wasn't for his fun activities and fun attitude, I would have been like, nah, I ain't watching it.
And then I have a question, and this is really the last question. It's just, why do you think they changed from chronological episodes, where I feel like they used to, in the first season, they would kind of go from race to race. And then suddenly the seasons were more like following events, like Joe's crash, where, I mean, it felt like the whole season was just repeating that. And it kind of made the show to me like repetitive. So I don't know if that was like maybe the best decision.
Yeah, honestly, that one threw me off for a loop too, because I was like, what happened to this change? Because it almost seemed like each episode was more so based team reaction wise. So like each team got their own episode. So I don't know if they were just like, season 5, let's change it up a little bit. I don't feel like it, based off of ratings and people's reactions, I don't think people really liked it. And I think it was because we just constantly saw such a rough crash. And it's like, yeah, we all watched it live. We don't want to keep reliving it. Please stop. But yeah, that would be my guess, is definitely like they wanted to change it up a bit, give each team their own focus instead of jumping between different teams and drivers each episode. And with all those questions wrapped up, we're going to jump in and talk about our favorite moments from DTS. I'm going to start with mine. My personal favorite you can actually hear as a pre-outro for our Red Bull episode. Go check out episode 27, Flying with Red Bull. But my second favorite moment for DTS was the Phoenix. When Roman had his horrible crash in 2020 at Bahrain GP, the way that was edited and shot, just absolutely incredible. I mean, I can still watch that moment in the series and have the same reaction as I originally did. It gives me such anxiety every time, even though I know the outcome. He's in Indy right now. He's good, guys, but it still stresses me out.
I think the fave moment for me would honestly be going back to the beginning of DTS. where Danny Rick wins Monaco. I love just how season 1 was portrayed as a whole, following the drivers, the teams. There was such a build up though from Danny staying to Danny leaving Red Bull, and Danny versus Max, and winning that podium in Monaco, which is a very prestige win, especially following like the 2 years before, where like he had a very bad like Monaco like race. And it still seems iconic, and every time I watch that episode and see the scene where he like falls into the pool and everybody's still happy, it still plays in my head on replay of just how happy everyone was. So Netflix, if you're listening to this, please bring back more of season 1. Thank you.
And I mean, I had a few fave moments. I mean, seeing Carlos win, seeing Pierre win. The first wins on Drive to Survive in general are pretty cool to see, which shout out, we'll have an episode about that soon. But I think my favorite thing was when the Renault drama. So like Red Bull versus Renault. And this is when we saw Danny leave with the Renault engine to their team, because the drama was mostly portrayed between Chris and then the team principal at the time for Renault, Cyril, who again was probably dramatized because of the show, but they had a lot of conversations and there were these arguments and there was like these cheap shots where principal from Renault was like, "Oh, so you're down a car and an engine. I'm sorry, you're down an engine and a driver." And I remember Chris like laughed it off, like ha ha ha. Which honestly, I guess Chris did have the last laugh because Red Bull's doing so well on the circuit now. But if anything, we actually, what I think is so amazing about Drive to Survive was how they brought that one episode, Red Bull versus Renault, and then it came full circle when we saw Danny leaving McLaren, which, if surprise, didn't know, didn't see the show, spoiler, he left Renault for McLaren, and that didn't go well for him. And you know what? Drive to Survive, they got this shot, man. They got it. And it was like the X team principal, and you see Danny walking by, and the X team principal, Cyril, he pulls Danny in, and in Italian, trying to be a little sneaky, says, "I told you not to trust Zach." And you know what? It's in that moment where I'm sure maybe, I don't know. I feel like if I was Danny, I would have had a moment of like, damn, just like, damn. There's no other response you can have. Because I don't know, I feel like a lot of people don't agree with this, but to this day, I don't think Danny leaving Red Bull was a mistake. I don't. That Red Bull team became Max's. I think it was a mistake of Danny leaving Renault because they were just building it. They were building up this momentum. They were getting the wins. And then he was like, psych, I'm going to go to McLaren. And I don't know. I feel like if Danny would have stayed, we probably maybe would even still see Renault on the F1 grid.
Yeah, I'd definitely be curious to see, or if he stayed with Renault, if he'd be with Alpine to this day, instead of having gone to McLaren. Like, if we see him and Esteban still as the pairing. I don't know, that'd be very interesting. But one of my favorite moments of DTS, LeAnne actually kind of brought it up a little bit, was in season 5 when there was a team principal meeting because some of the cars were having some issues, and Toto was kind of complaining about the Mercedes, and Christian, he just was like, if you've got a problem, then change your fucking car. And then Toto was like, no, well, Checo is saying your car is shit, so, and I have the receipts, blah, blah, blah. So they had a little cat fight break out between the two of them, and we got that iconic moment from the season. But another one of my favorite moments definitely has to be Danny and Lando coming 1-2 in Monza. It was just such a step forward for not only Danny, but the team as well. And it was just such a positive thing for the both of them. And speaking of more iconic moments, I don't know about y'all, but I absolutely love the shot in season 5, the first episode of the Ferraris in slow-mo going around that corner around the Red Bull. That shot is beautiful. And it is one of my favorite shots, I think, out of the whole entire show. And after hearing Chelsea talk, another one of my favorite things, well, I don't know if it's my favorite thing, but the Red Bull drama with Pierre and Alex, that was definitely spicy. And I loved watching that go down and then seeing kind of like revenge of Pierre tying into his first win. Definitely one of my favorite parts about DTS.
For today's pre-outro, we are going to do a quote from the king of Drive to Survive himself, Danny Ricciardo. This quote has an even bigger meaning right now with everything going on in the industry. So the quote is, Netflix is a real bunch of. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode. It definitely has a special place in my heart. Let us know what your favorite Drive to Survive moment is, or what you think a future iconic DTS moment could be by reaching out to us on our socials. Everywhere, we are at Paddock Girls Podcast, except Twitter. There you can find us at Paddock Girls Pod. The next season of DTS should be dropping at the beginning of the next F1 season, and, who knows, you may see some reaction videos from some of us watching episodes. Don't forget to rate, share, and review us wherever you listen to podcasts. The countdown to Lights Out continues. 20 days to go, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us in the paddock. See you next time. Bye, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
See you later, Craig.
Bye, Craig.